My name is Elton Davis, and at 68 years old, I never thought my greatest battle would be against my own flesh and blood. After 42 years working for the Postal Service in Portland, I expected a peaceful retirement. Then my son Jason moved back home after his divorce. It started with missing cash, then escalated to something I never imagined possible. The day he spread my credit cards across our kitchen table and declared my pension belonged to him now, something inside me broke. If you are watching this video now, please let me know where you are viewing from. Hit that like button and subscribe. No retired parent should ever experience what happened in my kitchen that morning. I was born and raised in a small town outside of Portland. My father worked at the lumber mill, and my mother stayed home to raise me and my two sisters. We never had much, but we never went hungry either. I learned the value of hard work early on, watching my father leave for the mill before sunrise and return after sunset. His hands calloused, but his spirit unbroken. When I turned 18, I applied for a position at the local post office. It was supposed to be temporary, something to earn money while figuring out what I really wanted to do with my life. That temporary job turned into a 42-year career. I started sorting mail in the back room, then became a mail carrier, and eventually worked my way up to supervisor before retiring. I met Martha during my second year at the post office. She came in regularly to mail packages for her small crafting business. I noticed her immediately, with her warm smile and kind eyes. It took me 3 months to work up the courage to ask her out for coffee. 6 months later, I proposed. We had a simple wedding at her parents' church with just close family and friends. We bought our modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house in 1982, the same house I still live in today. The mortgage payment stretched our budget thin for years, but Martha was a wizard with our finances. We never took fancy vacations or drove new cars, but we were happy in our little corner of the world. Jason came along in 1984, our only child. Martha had complications during his birth that prevented us from having more children, but we poured all our love into raising him. From the moment I first held him, I promised to give him everything I never had growing up. Maybe that was where I went wrong. Jason was a bright child, quick to learn and full of energy. Martha and I encouraged his interests, from Little League baseball to science experiments that sometimes left our kitchen in disarray. We saved every month for his college fund, cutting corners elsewhere to ensure he would have opportunities. Martha was diagnosed with breast cancer when Jason was in his senior year of high school. For the next 15 years, we fought that terrible disease together. There were good years when remission gave us hope, and dark years when treatments left her too weak to get out of bed. Jason was away at college for much of it, then starting his career in Seattle. I never held it against him, understanding that a young man needed to build his own life. Martha passed away 5 years ago. The hospital bills had depleted much of our savings despite insurance, but I still had my pension and the house was paid off. I focused on building a new routine as a widower, joining a senior center for weekly card games and taking long walks around the neighborhood. The silence in the house was deafening at first, but I slowly adjusted to life without Martha. Jason graduated with a business degree, but struggled to find his footing in the corporate world. He bounced between jobs, never seeming to last more than a year or two at any company. He had big ideas and dreams, but lacked the patience and discipline to see things through. Still, I was proud of him for trying and supported him however I could. 3 years ago, Jason convinced me to help finance his startup, a meal delivery service targeting young professionals. I withdrew $20,000 from my retirement savings to help him get started, believing in his vision and wanting to support his independence. The business lasted 8 months before folding, with nothing to show for my investment. Jason was devastated but promised to pay me back someday. His marriage to Amanda had been struggling for years before the business failure. She was a kindergarten teacher, practical and down to earth, while Jason continued chasing the next big idea. Their arguments about finances grew more frequent, until 2 years ago when she filed for divorce. They had no children, which was a small mercy considering the bitterness of their separation. 6 months ago, Jason called me in tears. He had lost his apartment in Seattle after being laid off from his marketing job. With no income and nowhere to go, he asked if he could move back home temporarily while getting back on his feet. Of course I said yes, without hesitation. He was my son, my only family. The first few weeks went smoothly. Jason helped around the house, fixed things I had neglected since Martha died, and seemed genuinely grateful for the support. He talked about job applications and interviews, though nothing seemed to materialize. I was happy to have company again, to hear another voice in the house and share meals across the dinner table. I had worked hard all my life to ensure a comfortable retirement. My postal pension provided a reliable monthly income, and I had my retirement account that I drew from sparingly. Martha and I had always lived below our means, allowing us to build a modest nest egg despite her medical expenses. I was careful with money, keeping track of expenses in a ledger just as Martha had taught me years ago. My daily routine was simple but satisfying. Morning coffee on the porch when weather permitted, reading the newspaper front to back, a walk to the park and back before lunch. Afternoons spent on crossword puzzles or small projects around the house. Tuesday nights at the senior center for cards with Frank and the other regulars. Sunday dinners with Frank and his wife Doris, who had been our neighbors for over 30 years. Jason gradually disrupted this peaceful routine. He stayed up late watching television, slept until noon, and left dishes in the sink despite my gentle reminders. He became irritable when I asked about his job search, claiming I was pressuring him. The atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense, but I made excuses for him, remembering how difficult his divorce had been. Little did I know, those early tensions were just the beginning of a nightmare I could never have imagined. The first time I noticed money missing from my wallet, I assumed I had spent more than I remembered at the grocery store. $20 here, $30 there. Small enough amounts that I questioned my own memory, rather than suspecting my son. I started writing down every purchase in a small notebook, just to keep track. But the numbers still did not add up. Bills began arriving with charges I did not recognize. A streaming service subscription I never signed up for. Takeout food delivered to the house while I was at my doctor appointment. When I questioned Jason, he would shrug and suggest I must have forgotten ordering it, or claim it was a gift for me that he put on my card because his was maxed out. The requests for loans began about 2 months after he moved in. Just $100 to buy new interview clothes. $200 for a certification course that would make him more employable. I wanted to support his efforts to get back on his feet, so I agreed, though the money was never repaid. Each time he promised to return it with his first paycheck from his new job, a job that seemed perpetually on the horizon but never materialized. Jason had always been charming, able to talk his way into and out of situations since he was a boy. Now he used that charm to deflect my concerns and questions. When I expressed worry about his lack of progress in finding employment, he would remind me of all the ways he was helping around the house, as if that contribution justified indefinite financial support. Gradually, my social circle began to shrink. Jason found reasons why I should not attend my weekly card games at the senior center. First, he claimed to be concerned about me driving after dark. Then he suggested that Frank and the others were taking advantage of me in our friendly poker games, despite the fact that we played for pennies. When I insisted on going anyway, he would be in such a foul mood upon my return that it hardly seemed worth the trouble. Frank noticed the change in me. During one Tuesday card game that I managed to attend, he pulled me aside and asked if everything was all right. I made excuses for Jason, explained about his divorce and job loss, but Frank seemed unconvinced. He had known me for decades and could tell something was wrong beyond normal family stress. One afternoon, I returned from my walk to find Jason at the kitchen table, surrounded by opened mail, including bank statements and retirement account documents that had been in my desk drawer. When I asked what he was doing, he claimed to be helping organize my finances, suggesting that at my age I might need assistance keeping track of everything. There was something in his tone, a condescension that reminded me I was no longer the father in charge but an aging man potentially losing his grip. My landline phone rarely rang anymore, as most friends used cell phones now. But when it did, Jason began answering it before I could reach it, screening my calls as if I were a child. If Frank or other friends called, Jason would often claim I was resting or not feeling well, even when I was sitting right there in my recliner, perfectly fine. He began monitoring my conversations, hovering nearby when I did speak on the phone, making it impossible to discuss my growing concerns with anyone. Anxiety gnawed at me constantly. I started hiding small amounts of cash around the house, tucked into books or taped under drawers, creating a contingency fund without fully acknowledging to myself why I felt the need to do so. I checked my bank balance online daily, watching the numbers decrease faster than they should have. Jason became increasingly bold in his suggestions that I was too old to manage my own money. He would point out insignificant errors, like a misplaced receipt or a bill I had set aside to pay later, as evidence of my supposed decline. If I defended myself or disagreed with him, he would sigh dramatically and say he was only trying to help, making me feel both guilty and inadequate. The missing credit card incident should have been my breaking point. I always kept my wallet on my nightstand, with my main credit card, ID, and about $50 in cash inside. One morning, the credit card was gone. When I asked Jason about it, he feigned concern, helped me look for it, then suggested I had probably misplaced it somewhere in the house. He offered to call the bank to report it missing, taking my wallet to get the account information. The replacement card never arrived in the mail, though Jason assured me he had ordered it. I began to fear that I was losing my only family connection by doubting my son. Martha would have wanted me to support him, to believe in him as we always had. Yet a voice inside me, growing louder each day, warned that something was very wrong in my home. I ignored that voice, not wanting to face the possibility that my own child might be taking advantage of me. Frank invited me to dinner one Sunday, as had been our tradition for years. Jason claimed we had other plans I had never heard of until that moment. When I insisted we had no such commitments, he grew angry, accusing me of forgetfulness and embarrassing him by changing arrangements at the last minute. To keep peace, I called Frank and declined the invitation, hearing the concern in my old friend voice when I made a flimsy excuse. That night, I lay awake wondering how much longer this situation could continue. Jason had been living with me for nearly 5 months now, with no signs of the temporary arrangement ending. My savings were dwindling, my social connections fraying, and my confidence in my own perception of reality starting to waver under my son's constant gaslighting. I was afraid to confront him directly, afraid of driving away the only family I had left. But I was more afraid of what might happen if things continued on this path. The next morning would confirm my worst fears in a way I could never have anticipated. I woke up early that Tuesday, as was my habit after decades of rising before dawn for my postal route. The house was quiet, and I expected Jason would still be asleep until mid-morning as usual. I reached for my wallet on the nightstand to check if I had enough cash for the farmer market later that day, only to find it completely empty. No cash, no credit cards, no ID, nothing except a few membership cards to the hardware store and local library. My heart pounding, I put on my robe and slippers and went downstairs, thinking perhaps I had left my wallet in the kitchen the night before. What I found instead was Jason sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed despite the early hour, with my 3 credit cards and bank cards spread out in front of him alongside several papers. When he saw me, he did not even attempt to hide what he was doing. Instead, he gave me a smile that sent a chill through my body, nothing like the warm grin of the boy I had raised. It was calculating, cold, the smile of a stranger wearing my son's face. I stood frozen in the doorway, my voice barely a whisper when I finally managed to speak. "Jason, what are you doing with my cards?" He leaned back in the chair, his posture relaxed as if we were discussing the weather. "Sit down, Dad. We need to talk about your finances." I remained standing, my legs suddenly feeling too weak to carry me to a chair. "Those are my credit cards, and I need my wallet back." Jason sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. "That is exactly what we need to discuss. You are not managing your money properly. I have been watching for months now, seeing you waste your pension on unnecessary things, while I am struggling to get back on my feet." "What unnecessary things?" I asked, genuinely confused. My expenses had always been minimal, especially since Martha passed. Those card games where Frank and his friends take advantage of you. Donations to charities that are probably scams. All those books you buy instead of using the library. He waved his hand dismissively. "The point is, you are in no condition to manage your finances anymore. From now on, I will be handling everything. I stepped closer to the table, anger beginning to replace my initial shock. That is my money, Jason. My pension that I worked 42 years to earn. You have no right. His expression hardened. Your pension belongs to me now, Dad, as does this house and everything in it. He tapped the papers in front of him. I have been doing research. At your age, with your increasing forgetfulness, it would be very easy to have you declared incompetent. One call to Adult Protective Services about how you cannot remember to take your medications or pay your bills on time, and they will appoint me as your guardian. The casual cruelty in his voice stunned me. This was my son, the baby I had cradled in my arms, the boy whose bicycle I had taught him to ride, the young man for whom Martha and I had sacrificed so much. Now he was threatening me, preparing to steal everything I had worked for all my life. Why would you do this? I asked, my voice breaking. I have always supported you, always been there when you needed me. Jason leaned forward, his face hardening. Because I deserve it. Do you have any idea what it has been like living in your shadow? Perfect Elton Davis, model employee, devoted husband, pillar of the community. Meanwhile, I have tried and failed at everything I have ever done. He gestured around the kitchen. Look at this place. You get to own a home while I lost my apartment. You have a guaranteed pension while I cannot even get a decent job. And let us not forget how you and Mom paid for my education but refused to invest properly in my business ideas. The revisionist history was breathtaking. We had given Jason $20,000 for his startup, money we could ill afford after Martha medical expenses. We had supported him through college, multiple career changes, and his divorce. Yet somehow in his mind, we had failed him. I took care of Mom when she was sick, he continued, building his case on foundations of sand. I sacrificed my own opportunities to help her, and what did I get in return? Nothing. So yes, your pension is mine now. Consider it back payment for everything I have done for this family. Martha would have been heartbroken to hear him speak this way. She had fought through painful treatments, continuing to work on her craft business from her hospital bed to avoid being a burden. Jason had visited perhaps once a month during her illness, usually to ask for money for one venture or another. If you do not cooperate, Jason said, sliding a document across the table toward me, I will have no choice but to look into nursing home options. I am sure we can find somewhere basic that Medicaid will cover after we liquidate your assets. I picked up the paper. It was a power of attorney form, already filled out with Jason's name. All it needed was my signature to give him complete control over every aspect of my life, financial and medical. I am not signing this, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Jason's eyes narrowed. Yes, you are, because if you do not, I will make your life very difficult. Who do you think people will believe? A confused old man or his concerned son? Sign it, Dad. It will be easier for both of us. I considered my options. If I refused outright, Jason might follow through on his threats immediately. I needed time to think, to plan, to get help. So I did something I had never done before. I lied to my son. I need my reading glasses to look at this properly, I said, trying to sound defeated. Jason nodded, satisfied that he had won. Fine. The forms are not going anywhere, but neither are your credit cards or bank cards. Consider your accounts frozen until you sign. Over the next 24 hours, Jason's behavior grew even more controlling. He changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me the new one, claiming he was upgrading our security. He took my cell phone, saying it needed a software update but never returning it. He even took the house phone off the hook when he went out briefly to pick up groceries, ensuring I could not call anyone while he was gone. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, the home where Martha and I had raised our family, where we had built a life together. Each room held memories of happier times that now seemed to mock me as I wandered from window to window, watching the outside world continue without me. That night, alone in my bedroom, I wept silently for the first time since Martha's funeral. I mourned not just the betrayal by my son, but the death of the relationship I thought we had. How had I missed the signs of his true character? Had there been moments I could have intervened, guided him differently, prevented this outcome? As painful as it was, I knew I could not simply give in. Martha would have expected more from me. She had faced cancer with courage and dignity. I could face this challenge with the same resolve. I would need to be smart, to play along while secretly planning my escape from this situation. The next morning, I told Jason I was ready to discuss his proposal further. I pretended to be resigned to the idea, asking questions about how it would work practically. Would I get an allowance for personal items? Could I still go for my daily walks? He seemed pleased by my apparent submission, explaining graciously how he would take care of everything while giving me a small amount of spending money each week. "You will see this is for the best, Dad," he said, patting my hand condescendingly. "You raised me to take initiative and solve problems. That is all I am doing now, solving the problem of your declining years." I nodded meekly, while inside my mind was working furiously on a plan to get help before it was too late. Jason had a job interview the following afternoon, his first in months as far as I knew. He seemed nervous about leaving me alone in the house, checking that I did not have access to any phones or computers before he left. He even took my house keys, claiming he would make me a new set that I could use when accompanied by him. "I will only be gone for 2 hours," he said as he prepared to leave. "Do not answer the door for anyone. If there is an emergency, Mrs. Wilson next door will be home." I nodded obediently, playing the role of compliant, elderly father. As soon as his car pulled away, I went into action. I had exactly 2 hours to get help before he returned, possibly less if the interview went poorly or was shorter than expected. Without a phone or keys, my options were limited. I considered breaking a window to get out but worried about injuring myself. Instead, I went to the back door that led to our fenced yard. Jason had locked it and taken the key, but years of home maintenance had taught me a few tricks. I found a small screwdriver in my bedside table drawer and was able to remove the hinges from the door, allowing me to pull it open from the hinge side just enough to squeeze through. Once in the backyard, I used the gate to access the side of the house, then made my way to Frank's house next door. I had never been so grateful for my longtime neighbor and friend. I rang his doorbell, praying he would be home. Frank opened the door, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Elton, I have not seen you in weeks. Are you all right? You look terrible." The concern in his voice nearly broke me. It had been so long since anyone had shown genuine care for my well-being. "I need your help, Frank, and I need to use your phone." Frank ushered me inside without hesitation, leading me to his kitchen table. "Sit down before you fall down. What is going on? Is it Jason?" I nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. How does one admit that their own child has betrayed them so completely? The shame was overwhelming. "He has taken my wallet, my credit cards, my phone. He is trying to force me to sign over power of attorney. He says my pension belongs to him now." The words came out in a rush, sounding unbelievable even to my own ears. Frank's expression darkened. I knew something was wrong. "You have not been yourself since he moved in. Have you called the police?" I shook my head. "He is my son, Frank, my only family. I do not want him arrested. I just need help stopping this before I lose everything." Even now, I was making excuses for Jason, unable to fully accept what he had become. Frank placed his cordless phone in front of me. "Who do you want to call?" I thought for a moment. "The bank first. I need to protect whatever is left in my accounts." Frank nodded and went to get his car keys. "I will drive you there afterward. You should speak to someone in person." I called Portland Community Bank, where I had been a customer for over 30 years. The representative immediately transferred me to Sandra Williams, the branch manager who had helped me set up my retirement accounts years ago. "Mr. Davis," she said warmly when she came on the line, "it has been a while since we have seen you. How can I help today?" The kindness in her voice made it even harder to explain my situation. I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak clearly. "I need to put a freeze on all my accounts immediately. My son has taken my cards and is trying to access my funds without permission." There was a brief silence before Sandra responded, her tone shifting from friendly to professionally concerned. "I see. Can you come into the branch today? There are some steps we should take right away, and they would be better handled in person. My neighbor can drive me in now. If that works for you, I will make time. Come directly to my office, and we will sort this out. Frank drove me to the bank, filling the car with reassuring conversation about anything except my situation, sensing I needed the distraction. When we arrived, Sandra was waiting for us in the lobby and immediately escorted us to her private office. Once seated, I found it difficult to begin. The shame of having to admit what was happening felt almost as bad as the betrayal itself. Sandra seemed to sense my discomfort. "Mr. Davis, I want you to know that what you are describing is unfortunately not uncommon. Elder financial abuse happens more often than people realize, even within families. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Her words provided the permission I needed to tell my story. I explained everything, from Jason moving in to the gradual isolation, the missing money, and finally the confrontation over my credit cards and pension. As I spoke, Sandra took notes and occasionally asked clarifying questions. When I finished, she turned her computer monitor so I could see it. "I am showing you the recent activity on your accounts," she explained. "There have been several large transfers from your savings to your checking account over the past month, followed by ATM withdrawals of the maximum daily limit." I stared at the screen in disbelief. The transfers totaled over $12,000. Money I had no idea was missing, because Jason had been intercepting my mail and preventing me from checking my accounts online. "There is more," Sandra continued, her expression grim. "There have been 3 credit applications submitted in your name in the past 2 weeks. 2 were approved. The cards were sent to your home address. The cards that never arrived in my mailbox," I said quietly. "Exactly. And those cards have already been maxed out with cash advances and purchases." Frank, who had been silently supportive until now, let out a low whistle. "How much are we talking about?" "The total damage so far is approximately $37,000, Sandra replied. "That includes the transfers, credit card charges, and a personal loan that was processed last week." The amount was staggering. Nearly half of my remaining retirement savings gone in just a matter of weeks. "What can I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "First, we need to secure what is left," Sandra said efficiently. "I am placing freezes on all your existing accounts right now. No further withdrawals or transfers will be possible without you coming into the branch in person with ID." She typed rapidly on her keyboard for a few moments. "Next, we need to report the fraudulent credit applications and charges. That will require filing a police report." I hesitated, still reluctant to take legal action against my own son. Sandra reached across the desk and gently touched my hand. "Mr. Davis, I understand this is your son we are talking about, but what he has done is not just morally wrong, it is illegal. This is elder financial abuse, and it is a serious crime." "She is right, Elton," Frank added. "If you do not stop him now, he will take everything you have." I knew they were right, but taking this step felt like crossing a line from which there would be no return. Once I involved the authorities, my relationship with Jason would be forever changed, if not destroyed completely. Sandra seemed to read my thoughts. "Consider this, Mr. Davis. If Jason faces consequences now, there might be a chance for rehabilitation. Court-ordered financial counseling, probation, making amends. If this continues until he has taken everything, the damage to both of you will be much worse." Her logic made sense, even as my heart rebelled against the idea. I nodded slowly. "What do I need to do?" Sandra introduced me to Thomas Jenkins from the bank fraud department, who helped me file the necessary reports. He explained that the bank would work with the credit bureaus to remove the fraudulent accounts from my record and dispute the charges, but it would take time and require a police report. "Where will you go when you leave here?" Sandra asked as we were finishing the paperwork. "It might not be safe to return home if your son realizes what you have done." I had not thought that far ahead. The idea of not being able to return to my own home was another blow in an already devastating day. Frank spoke up immediately. "He will stay with Doris and me until this is sorted out. We have a spare room, and he is welcome as long as needed." I was overwhelmed by my friend, generosity. "Thank you, Frank. I do not know what I would have done without you today." As we prepared to leave, Sandra made one final suggestion. "Mr. Davis, would you be willing to come back in a week? By then, we should have more information about recovering your funds, and I have an idea that might help resolve the situation with your son." I agreed, curious about what she had in mind, but too emotionally exhausted to ask for details. Frank drove me to his house, where his wife Doris welcomed me with open arms and no questions, simply saying that their home was my home for as long as I needed. That evening, Jason called Frank's house, frantic, after returning home to find me gone. Frank calmly informed him that I was safe, but would not be returning home immediately. Jason alternated between threats and pleas, demanding to speak with me, but Frank held firm, telling him that any further communication would need to go through the bank or the authorities. After hanging up, Frank turned to me with a grim smile. He sounds worried. Good. He should be. I spent that night in Frank's guest room, surrounded by borrowed toiletries and clothes, feeling both homeless and strangely liberated. For the first time in months, I fell asleep without fear of what the next day might bring at the hands of my own son. A week passed at Frank and Dora's house. They were gracious hosts, never making me feel like a burden despite the unexpected nature of my stay. Doris kept me well fed with her excellent cooking, while Frank provided companionship and regular games of chess to keep my mind occupied. Jason called repeatedly, his messages alternating between anger and apparent concern for my well-being. I did not speak to him directly, not yet ready for that confrontation. Frank screened all calls and kept me updated on Jason escalating threats, which now included hiring a lawyer to declare me incompetent. The police had taken my report seriously, assigning an officer who specialized in elder abuse cases. Detective Lisa Ramirez visited Frank's house to take my full statement, patiently guiding me through the painful process of documenting every detail of Jason's actions. She explained that the district attorney would review the evidence and determine what charges might be appropriate. Financial elder abuse is taken very seriously in our state, Detective Ramirez assured me. The penalties can include jail time, especially with the amount of money involved in your case. The thought of my son in jail was still difficult to accept, but I was beginning to understand that without serious intervention, Jason's behavior would only worsen. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after my escape, Sandra from the bank called Frank's house. "Mr. Davis, we have made significant progress on your case," she said when I answered. "Would you be able to come in tomorrow morning for a meeting, say around 10:30? "Of course," I replied. "Frank has been kind enough to offer transportation whenever I need it." "Excellent. And Mr. Davis, would you be willing to have your son attend this meeting as well?" Her request caught me off guard. "You want Jason to come?" "Why? I believe it would be in everyone's best interest. We have compiled documentation regarding the unauthorized transactions and identity theft. Having him present would allow us to address everything at once, with bank security and potentially law enforcement on hand if needed." I considered her suggestion. The thought of facing Jason made my stomach clench with anxiety, but I also knew that eventually we would need to confront the situation directly. "How would we get him to come?" I asked. "He must know by now that I have gone to the bank and police. You could tell him that the bank has requested a meeting regarding your accounts and that you are willing to discuss a compromise about managing your finances together," Sandra suggested. "We will handle the rest." After discussing it with Frank, who agreed to accompany me for support, I called Jason from Frank's landline. He answered on the first ring. "Dad, where are you? I have been worried sick." His voice held the perfect note of concern, and for a moment, I almost believed him. "I am safe, Jason. I am staying with friends for now," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You need to come home. It is not safe for someone your age to be away from home. What if you forget your medications or fall? I am your son. I should be taking care of you." The manipulation was so transparent now that I had some distance from it. "The bank has requested a meeting with both of us, tomorrow at 10:30, I said, ignoring his comments. "They want to discuss the recent activity on my accounts and possible arrangements for the future." There was a pause before Jason responded, his voice cautious. "What kind of arrangements? Maybe a joint account or something that would give you some oversight of my finances without removing my access completely." The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but necessary. "So you understand that I was only trying to help?" Jason sounded eager to believe I was capitulating. "I was worried about you making poor financial decisions at your age." "We can discuss everything tomorrow at the bank," I said, unwilling to engage further with his justifications. Will you meet me there? Of course, Dad. I will be there. Portland Community Bank on Main Street, right? Yes, 10:30. Ask for Sandra Williams' office. I will see you tomorrow then. And Dad, I'm glad you called. I really do just want what is best for you. After hanging up, I let out a long breath. The conversation had been harder than I expected, hearing Jason's voice and the familiar patterns of his manipulation. You did great, Frank assured me, patting my shoulder. Remember, you are not alone in this. The next morning, Frank drove me to the bank, arriving 15 minutes early as planned. Sandra greeted us warmly and escorted us to a conference room rather than her office. We thought a more formal setting would be appropriate, she explained, and it has better security features. The conference room had a large table with several chairs, a computer setup at one end, and a side door in addition to the main entrance. Already seated was Thomas from the fraud department and a uniformed security officer. Sandra gestured for me to take a seat at the head of the table. Mr. Davis, we have prepared all the documentation regarding the unauthorized transactions. When your son arrives, I will lead the conversation. You do not need to say anything unless you want to. Frank took the seat beside me, a solid presence of support. We waited in tense silence until precisely 10:30, when Sandra received a call from the front desk announcing Jason's arrival. My heart pounded as the door opened and Jason walked in. He was well dressed in a button-up shirt and slacks, his hair neatly combed, looking every bit the concerned, responsible son. His confident smile faltered slightly when he noticed the security officer in the formal setting. Dad, he said, moving toward me with arms outstretched as if for a hug. I have been so worried about you. The security officer subtly shifted position, blocking Jason's path to me. Sandra stepped forward with a professional smile. Mr. Davis, thank you for coming. I am Sandra Williams, the branch manager. Please have a seat. She gestured to a chair on the opposite side of the table from me and Frank. Jason hesitated, clearly not expecting this formal reception. I thought this was a family meeting about my father's finances. It is about your father's finances, Sandra confirmed. Specifically, the unauthorized access and transfers from his accounts over the past 2 months. Jason's face tightened almost imperceptibly before he composed himself. There must be some misunderstanding. As I have been trying to explain to my father, I have been helping him manage his money because he has been showing signs of confusion lately. Sandra sat down and opened a folder in front of her. Mr. Davis, over the past 60 days, there have been withdrawals and charges totaling $37,422 from your father's accounts. We have documentation showing that these transactions were made without his knowledge or consent. Jason shifted in his chair, his confident demeanor beginning to crack. My father gave me permission to help with his finances. He is getting older and needed assistance. Did he give you permission to apply for 3 new credit cards in his name? Thomas asked, sliding copies of the applications across the table. Or to take out a personal loan using his social security number and electronic signature? Sandra added. Jason glanced at me, then back at the bank officials. These were decisions we made together for his benefit. Dad, tell them we discussed this. All eyes turned to me. I met my son gaze directly. I never gave you permission to take my credit cards or access my accounts, Jason. You took my wallet, isolated me in my own home, and threatened to put me in a nursing home if I did not cooperate. Jason's face flushed with anger. That is not true. You are confused. This is exactly why I needed to step in and take control. He forgets things, makes up stories. He needs supervision. Sandra's expression remained neutral. We have reviewed Mr. Davis' account history for the past 10 years. Until 6 months ago when you moved in with him, his financial management was impeccable. Regular deposits, prudent withdrawals, bills paid on time. There is no evidence of confusion or mismanagement. The confusion began when cards went missing and transactions appeared that he did not authorize, Thomas added. Jason was beginning to look cornered. This is ridiculous. I am his son. I was trying to protect him by maxing out fraudulent credit cards with cash advances, by transferring his retirement savings to accounts you control. Sandra's tone remained professional, but had taken on a steely edge. I was going to pay it all back. Jason insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Sandra reached into her folder and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Davis," she said, addressing me, "we have compiled all the evidence of fraudulent activity on your accounts. The bank has already reversed the most recent transactions and will be working with the credit bureaus to dispute the fraudulent cards and loans." She handed me the envelope, then turned back to Jason. "Mr. Davis, you might want to open this in front of your son." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside were printouts of account statements, credit applications, and ATM camera photos showing Jason making withdrawals using my cards. But there was something else as well, a formal letter on bank letterhead. "This letter confirms that we have provided all evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse to the Portland Police Department," I read aloud, my voice growing steadier with each word. "The bank has filed a formal criminal complaint and will be cooperating fully with the investigation. Additionally, we have implemented enhanced security measures on all accounts belonging to Elton Davis, including in-person verification requirements and fraud alerts." Jason's face drained of color as I continued reading. The letter detailed every unauthorized transaction, every fraudulent application, with dates, times, and amounts. It concluded with a statement that the bank was prepared to testify in court about these findings if criminal charges were filed. "This cannot be happening," Jason whispered, more to himself than to us. "I am his son, his only family. Being family does not give you the right to steal from your father," Sandra said firmly. "Financial elder abuse is a serious crime, regardless of the relationship between parties." Jason turned to me, his expression a mix of anger and panic. "Dad, you cannot let them do this. Tell them you gave me permission. Tell them you wanted me to manage your money." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, seeing not the child I had raised but the man he had become. "I cannot lie for you, Jason. What you did was wrong. You betrayed my trust and tried to steal everything I worked for all my life." "What happens now?" Jason asked, his voice barely audible as the reality of his situation sank in. Sandra nodded toward the side door, which opened to reveal Detective Ramirez. "Now we continue this conversation at the police station," the detective said. "Jason Davis, I am here to discuss the allegations of elder financial abuse and fraud." Jason stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "This is insane. I was helping him. He is my father." The security officer moved closer, hand resting near his taser. "Sir, please remain calm." "Jason," I said quietly, "the truth is in those documents. You took advantage of me, your own father. You need help, son." As the full impact of his actions and their consequences hit him, Jason crumpled back into his chair. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks as he put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, the facade of the confident manipulator completely shattered. "I am sorry," he whispered between sobs. "I did not mean for it to go this far. I just needed money. Everything in my life has fallen apart." Detective Ramirez approached him calmly. "Mr. Davis, we can continue this conversation at the station. You are not under arrest at this time, but I do need to take your statement regarding these allegations." Jason looked up at me one last time, his face pale and streaked with tears. "Dad, please." I felt a complex mix of emotions, grief for what our relationship had become, anger at his betrayal, but also a strange sense of relief that the truth was finally exposed. "Go with Detective Ramirez, Jason. Tell her the truth. That is the only way forward from here." As Jason was escorted from the room, Sandra turned to me with compassion in her eyes. "I am sorry it came to this, Mr. Davis. I know this must be incredibly difficult for you." Frank put his arm around my shoulders. "You did the right thing, Elton. It was the only way." I nodded, watching through the glass door as my son walked away between the detective and security officer, his head bowed and shoulders slumped in defeat. It was not the outcome I had ever imagined for us, but perhaps it was the intervention Jason needed to confront his actions and their consequences. The days following the bank confrontation passed in a blur of legal procedures and emotional processing. Detective Ramirez kept me informed about Jason's case as it moved forward. After a lengthy interview at the police station, Jason had been formally charged with financial elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud, then released on his own recognizance with orders to have no contact with me. My feelings remained conflicted. While I knew the charges were justified, the thought of my only child having a criminal record caused me deep sadness. Martha would have been heartbroken to see our family torn apart this way, yet I believed she would have supported me in standing up for myself. A week after the bank meeting, I returned to my home for the first time, accompanied by Frank and a police officer who ensured the house was secure. Jason had apparently left in a hurry the day after our confrontation, taking only some clothes and personal items. The house was a mess, with unwashed dishes piled in the sink and empty takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. "Home sweet home," I muttered, surveying the disarray with mixed emotions. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. "Nothing that cannot be fixed, Elton. Doris and I will help you get things back in order." The officer provided me with information about changing the locks and recommended a local locksmith who offered senior discounts. Before leaving, he also gave me pamphlets about victim services and support groups for those who had experienced elder abuse. "You are not alone in this, Mr. Davis," he assured me. "Many seniors go through similar situations with family members. There are resources available to help you recover, both financially and emotionally." Over the next few days, with help from Frank and Doris, I reclaimed my space. We changed the locks, cleaned the house thoroughly, and sorted through the mail that had accumulated. I discovered unpaid bills and late notices that Jason had hidden from me, requiring hours on the phone with various companies to explain the situation and arrange payment plans. Sandra from the bank continued to be an invaluable ally, helping me track down all the fraudulent accounts Jason had opened and working with credit agencies to repair my credit score. The bank was able to recover about 60% of the stolen money immediately, with promises to continue pursuing the rest through legal channels. 2 weeks after moving back home, I received a call from the district attorney office. Jason had been offered a plea deal that would allow him to avoid maximum jail time if he admitted guilt, agreed to full restitution, and completed financial counseling and community service. "Would you be comfortable with this arrangement, Mr. Davis?" the assistant district attorney asked me. "As the victim, your input is important to us." I considered the question carefully. Did I want my son to go to prison? Despite everything, the answer was no. "I believe in consequences," I told her, "but I also believe in second chances. If he is willing to take responsibility and make amends, I support a plea deal that includes those elements." The next day, I received a letter from Jason, forwarded through his court-appointed attorney. Reading his words brought a fresh wave of complicated emotions. "Dear Dad," he had written in the shaky handwriting I remembered from his school days, "I do not know if you will ever forgive me for what I did, and I would not blame you if you did not. I have no excuses. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, and I am truly sorry. The lawyer says I might avoid jail time with this plea deal, but that feels like more than I deserve. I am going to accept responsibility and do whatever it takes to make this right, even though I know it can never be completely right again. I miss you and I am sorry for hurting you. Jason." The letter contained no manipulative language, no attempts to justify his actions or shift blame. For the first time in years, perhaps, my son's words seemed genuinely his own, rather than calculated to achieve some goal. A month after the bank confrontation, Jason appeared in court to enter his guilty plea. Frank drove me to the courthouse, though I was unsure whether I wanted to attend until the last minute. In the end, I decided I needed to witness this moment, both for closure and to show Jason that I had not abandoned him entirely, despite his actions. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, nothing like the grand chambers shown on television. Jason sat beside his attorney, wearing a borrowed suit that seemed too large for his frame. He looked thinner than when I had last seen him, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. When he spotted me entering with Frank, his eyes widened in surprise. I gave him a small nod but took a seat several rows back, not yet ready for closer contact. The proceedings were brief and formal. Jason pled guilty to 2 felony counts of financial elder abuse and identity theft, with the fraud charges reduced as part of the plea agreement. The judge, An older woman with a stern but fair demeanor addressed him directly. "Mr. Davis, do you understand that by pleading guilty to these charges, you are admitting to stealing from and defrauding your elderly father, a man who provided you with shelter and support?" Jason's voice was barely audible as he replied, "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you understand the terms of your plea agreement? You will serve 90 days in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. You must complete financial counseling and 200 hours of community service, preferably with organizations serving senior citizens. You must make full restitution of all stolen funds, approximately $37,000, according to a payment schedule to be determined by your probation officer. You must have no contact with the victim except as permitted by the court. Do you understand and accept these terms?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jason repeated. His shoulders slumped in resignation. The judge glanced in my direction before continuing. "Mr. Davis, elder abuse is a particularly troubling crime because it violates the trust between family members and targets vulnerable individuals who should be able to rely on their loved ones for protection, not exploitation. I hope that during your sentence, you will reflect deeply on the harm you have caused and work toward genuine rehabilitation." She set a date for Jason to begin serving his jail time, allowing him 2 weeks to get his affairs in order. As the bailiff let him out, Jason looked back at me one last time, his expression a mixture of shame and regret. Outside the courthouse, Frank asked if I wanted to speak with Jason before he was taken away. I shook my head, not yet ready for that conversation. "Not today," I said quietly, "but maybe soon." Over the following weeks, I gradually rebuilt my life and independence. Sandra had recommended a support group for victims of elder abuse that met at the senior center. Initially reluctant, I finally attended a session and was surprised to find how therapeutic it was to share my experience with others who truly understood. The group was facilitated by a social worker named Maria, who specialized in elder issues. "What many people do not realize," she explained during one session, "is that elder abuse is about power and control, not just money. Your financial independence represents your autonomy, which is why it is often the first target." Her words resonated deeply with me, helping me understand that what had happened was not my fault and did not reflect a failure in how I had raised Jason. Many other group members had similar stories of beloved family members who had exploited their trust. Frank and Doris remained steadfast friends throughout this difficult period. When I expressed guilt about the time and support they had given me, Frank waved away my concerns. "That is what friends do, Elton. You would have done the same for us." 4 weeks into Jason's jail sentence, I received a request through his attorney. He wanted to see me. After discussing it with Maria from the support group, I agreed to a supervised visit at the county facility. The visiting room was stark and institutional, with bolted-down tables and chairs. Jason entered wearing a standard-issue jumpsuit, looking diminished in ways that went beyond his physical appearance. When he saw me, he stopped short, as if uncertain whether to approach. "Hello, Jason," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat down carefully, his eyes downcast. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would." "I almost did not," I admitted, "but I thought we should talk." "Dad, I am so sorry," he began, his voice breaking. "I keep trying to understand why I did what I did, how I could have convinced myself it was okay to treat you that way. The counselor here says I have issues with entitlement and resentment that I have never dealt with properly." I listened as he continued, describing the group therapy sessions he was attending in jail and the realizations he was beginning to have about his behavior patterns. "I always blamed others for my failures," he said. "My bosses, my ex-wife, even you and Mom sometimes. It was easier than admitting I made bad choices or did not work hard enough. For the first time in years, perhaps, I felt I was hearing the real Jason, not the manipulative facade he had constructed." "What happens when you get out?" I asked. "I will be in a halfway house at first. I have to find a job, start making restitution payments. The probation officer said there might be opportunities with companies that partner with the reentry program." He hesitated before adding, "I do not expect to move back in with you. I know that trust is gone." I nodded, acknowledging the truth of his statement. Trust can be rebuilt, Jason, but it takes time and consistent action. I cannot go through this again. I know, he said quietly. I am going to do better, Dad. Not just for you, but for myself too. I do not want to be this person anymore. As I left the jail that day, I felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead would not be easy for either of us, but perhaps this painful intervention had created an opportunity for genuine change. 6 months after the confrontation at the bank, my life had settled into a new rhythm. The most acute pain of betrayal had gradually subsided, replaced by a measured acceptance of our changed circumstances. My home was truly mine again, a sanctuary rather than a prison. I had resumed my weekly card games at the senior center, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering at the library 2 afternoons a week. Sandra at the bank had helped me create new financial safeguards to protect my accounts. We set up special monitoring services and verification steps for large transactions. She also introduced me to digital banking tools designed for seniors, allowing me to keep closer track of my finances without needing to visit the branch frequently. Your experience has actually helped us improve our elder fraud detection systems, she told me during one visit. We have implemented new training for our staff, based partly on what happened to you. It was a small consolation to know that my painful experience might help protect others from similar situations. Jason had been released from jail after serving his 90-day sentence and was now living at a halfway house across town. As part of his probation, he had found a job at a warehouse that participated in the re-entry program for former inmates. The pay was modest, but it allowed him to begin making small restitution payments as required by the court. We had begun the delicate process of rebuilding our relationship, meeting once a week for coffee at a neutral location, usually the diner midway between our homes. Our conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes surprisingly meaningful. We navigated this new territory carefully, both aware of the broken trust that lay between us, but also of the family bond that remained despite everything. The financial counseling has been eye-opening, Jason told me during one of these meetings. I never really understood how to manage money properly. Mom always handled that in our house, and then Amanda did when we were married. When things fell apart with the business and the divorce, I just kept digging myself deeper. Your mother was certainly better with finances than me, I agreed. But that is no excuse for what you did. I know, he said quickly. I am not making excuses anymore, just trying to understand the patterns so I can change them. The court had assigned us to family counseling with Dr. Brennan, a therapist who specialized in healing family relationships after traumatic breaches of trust. Our weekly sessions were challenging but productive, providing a structured environment to address painful topics under professional guidance. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or removing consequences, Dr. Brennan explained during one particularly difficult session. It means choosing to release the bitterness while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. Those words became a touchstone for me in the months that followed. I could work toward forgiving Jason without putting myself at risk or pretending the betrayal had never happened. My experience had also led me to become something of an advocate for elder financial abuse awareness. Maria from the support group had invited me to speak at several senior centers, sharing my story and the warning signs I had missed. Financial abusers often start with small boundary violations to test what they can get away with. I would explain to the attentive audiences of seniors. They might borrow small amounts of money, open your mail, or begin isolating you from friends who might notice something wrong. After one such presentation, an elderly woman approached me with tears in her eyes. You just described exactly what my nephew has been doing, she whispered. I was afraid to tell anyone because I did not want to get him in trouble. I connected her with Maria for additional support, feeling a deep sense of purpose in helping others recognize and escape situations similar to what I had experienced. Frank remained my closest friend and strongest supporter throughout this journey. We resumed our Sunday dinner tradition, often including other neighbors to create a sense of community that had been missing during Jason time in my home. You know what impresses me most about you, Elton? Frank said one evening as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. Your resilience. Most people would have been broken by what happened, but you have turned it into something positive. I considered his words carefully. I do not think I had a choice. Either I let the experience define and diminish me, or I used it to grow stronger. Martha would have expected me to choose the latter. My financial situation had largely stabilized. The bank had recovered most of the stolen funds, and Jason's regular restitution payments, though small, demonstrated his commitment to making amends. I had learned to live somewhat more frugally, but found I did not miss the extra expenses much. What I valued now was security and peace of mind, not material possessions. One Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after the confrontation at the bank, Jason arrived at our weekly coffee meeting with an envelope in his hand. "What is that?" I asked as he sat down across from me. "My first full restitution payment," he said, sliding the envelope across the table. "The warehouse gave me a promotion to shift supervisor last month. I have been saving every extra dollar." I opened the envelope to find a cashier check for $2,000 made out to me. It was a significant amount given his modest income, representing genuine sacrifice on his part. "Thank you," I said, truly touched by the gesture. "This means a lot, Jason." "It is just the beginning," he replied. "I know I can never fully repay what I took from you, not just the money but the trust, but I am going to spend the rest of my life trying." In that moment, looking at my son across the table, I saw glimmers of the boy I had raised, the man he was struggling to become. The road to full reconciliation would be long, with likely setbacks along the way. Yet for the first time, I felt genuine hope that we might find our way to a new relationship, different from before but potentially meaningful in its own way. What I had learned through this painful journey was that love and boundaries are not opposites but complementary forces. True love includes setting healthy boundaries and holding people accountable for their actions. Enabling harmful behavior is not love, no matter how much we might tell ourselves it is. I had also discovered the strength that comes from community. Without Frank, Sandra, Maria, and the others who supported me, I might never have found the courage to stand up for myself. We are not meant to face our hardest battles alone. Perhaps most importantly, I had learned that it is never too late to reclaim your power and dignity. At 68 years old, I had faced one of the most devastating betrayals imaginable, and emerged not just surviving but growing in ways I could never have anticipated. As Jason and I walked out of the diner that day, the future still uncertain but filled with possibility, I thought of what I would tell others facing similar situations. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Reach out for help even when shame makes it difficult. Set boundaries with those you love when necessary. And remember that your age does not diminish your right to respect, autonomy, and security. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Every like and share helps spread awareness about elder financial abuse and reminds those experiencing it that they are not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, it is never too late to stand up for yourself and reclaim your dignity.